Since my wife had left, I felt like I didn't have a purpose anymore. I had my garden and my beautiful flowers, but somehow I needed more. Then one night, when I was outside getting some fresh air, I with utter disbelief observed a little animal scurry across the lawn heading to a hedge on the other side of the garden. Even though it was dark, I decided to walk to the hedge and have a look for it. It was too big to be a field mouse and too small to be a cat. Once there, I peered in and heard the rustling of leaves while something moved amongst them. Inside the house was a torch, so with haste, I proceeded back indoors to retrieve it. It sat on a box at the back of the room. I got hold of it, then made my way back outside, excited with what I might find. Who was this little visitor in my garden? Once I was back at the hedge, I shone the light in. All of a sudden, I saw what looked like a ball with tiny spikes, huddled between some lower leaves. With sheer delight, I now realized who the visitor was. Not wanting to scare it, I headed back to the side of the house, then waited patiently. Within seconds, I heard some grunting sounds, followed by this creature scurrying past me faster than I would expect, for its size, before disappearing through the gate which led to the front drive. "Goodbye, my little friend. Hopefully I'll see you again tomorrow night," I said. It was time to get ready for bed, so I headed indoors. The next day, as I did my shopping at the local store, I picked up some dry cat biscuits, which supposedly was the best thing to feed hedgehogs, checking the ingredients first though, as there were certain things that weren't suitable for them. After that, I took the shopping back home and unpacked it, then had a nice cup of tea and some toast, then headed out into the garden to tend to my flowers. Since I'd retired, it was important to keep the brain active, you see. It was common knowledge that if you didn't use it, you'd lose it. At 10 p.m. I went outside, which was the same time as last night, when I first encountered my spiky friend. But this time, I had a saucer with small biscuits on, and another one filled with water. In the middle of the lawn, I put them down, then walked back to the house. I stayed hidden, not wanting to scare the hedgehog away. When after a while it hadn't appeared, I decided to go back inside feeling a little disappointed. By 6 a.m. I got out of bed, then ventured into the garden. As usual, the flowers illuminated beautifully in the morning sun, and in the center of the garden sat the two saucers that I'd left out the night before. The one for the food was empty, which meant only one thing: as to my knowledge there wasn't a cat in the area, so it must have been my nighttime visitor. Every night without fail, I'd leave the food and water in the same spot. By the next morning, it'd always be empty. A week and a half later, after I'd taken the food and water out for my nocturnal friend, I suddenly heard a strange sound coming from the front gate. With sheer delight, I observed 2 adult hedgehogs and 4 tiny ones making their way onto the lawn. 5 minutes later and the biscuits had been eaten. Not realizing until tonight, there was a whole family to feed, which meant tomorrow, I'll need to pick up some more food and a bigger saucer. After they'd vanished under a hedge at the back of the garden, which led to a field, I went indoors, overjoyed by what I'd just seen. That night, as I was in bed, I couldn't get them out of my thoughts. The garden was a haven for the hedgehogs, but how could I improve it for them? Then it came to me in a flash. The next day, I visited a man who lived in the nearby village, who was renowned for helping and caring for these beloved creatures, and his advice to me if I truly wanted to help was to buy or even build a hedgehog home that I could put in my garden, so they could all live there, as this would give them a fighting chance. As in the last few years their numbers were declining. Because I liked a challenge, I decided to build one. From what the man had said and doing some research online, the entrance to the house needed to be big enough for a fully grown hedgehog to enter and leave without any problems. Also, to stop cats getting in, the inside would need to be a series of tunnels of a certain size, so the hedgehog can move around its home in comfort. You also have to take into consideration the size of the house, if you have a family living there. It took a few days to get all the materials I needed, but once they'd arrived, I was busy in the garage building my new friends a home that they would be proud of. A week later, I had finished it. Straight away I rang the hedgehog man, and he came round. The man seemed very pleased with it, then said with a smile on his face, "If you ever fancy building any more, then I would be more than happy to buy them off you." "That sounds a great idea," I replied. We then shook hands. It only took 2 days for the family of hedgehogs to move into their new home. Over time, me and the Hedgehog Man, whose name was Trevor, became very good friends, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a purpose again. The end.